Hi everyone, welcome to the NowThis studio on election night. It's 10 p.m. and we're drinking coffee. That can only mean one thing, it is election night. If you're just tuning in, we've been going live at the top of every hour to break down the latest results. Now that it's getting a little bit later in the night, we do have a lot to talk about. So joining me now is Carrie Twigg, a cultural strategist, Jed Legum, the founder of Popular Information, and David Rothschild, pollster and founder of PredictWise, who's been manning our so-called magic whiteboard all night. CNN might have that interactivity with all the graphics, but what else do you need? We've got all the information that you need. Some top line news for you. Florida has passed a historic amendment to restore voting rights to 1.5 million former felons. It's the biggest expansion of voting rights since the Voting Rights Act, and it will fundamentally change Florida. We've also got some more exciting firsts, which has been a major angle of NowThis coverage tonight. The first Latino women to represent Texas have been elected to Congress. Their names are Veronica Escobar and Sylvia Garcia. Despite the state being nearly 40% Latino, they are actually the first Latino women to represent the state. And here in New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez officially becomes the youngest woman ever elected to Congress. So even though we've got some tight races that we're still watching in Georgia and Florida with the governor's races, we've also got a lot of exciting firsts to talk about. So David, why don't we go to you with what's going on with our whiteboard?
Yeah, so look, as we've been saying all night, we started out with about 208 seats in the Democratic column, about 194 seats. We'll publish this later, but basically every one of these seats that was blue has gone blue, that's red has gone red, all coming down to here. They're starting to break the Democrats' way enough, and so with 33 toss-up seats and the Democrats only needing 10, we're up to 90, really almost 95% to take the House at this point. And I think by the 11 o'clock hour, once those California seats become official, there's a good chance that we may be able to call the House at 11 o'clock. So we'll wait for that. Senate, not looking as good for the Democrats. So we started out with 42 and 46, and been no surprises on the ones that we knew were going to happen. New Jersey and West Virginia have been called there. A few seats, including Tennessee, which the Democrats were hoping to pick up, has been called, along with Indiana. And then we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seats sitting out there. And then we have these 2 toss-ups as well. So there's 8 seats total. This is where we stand, 46-52. If things go as we see, plus, of course, these additional 2 toss-up seats, which we're waiting for more information that's probably coming on my screen right now. Some exciting news. It looks like Kansas, has been trending very heavily, and some places are calling that, so we'll see that in a few seconds, for the Democrats. So that would be a big pickup there with Chris Kobach, who has a very high-profile positions both in writing the papers, please laws in Arizona, as well as his work in voter suppression across the country with Crosscheck. This has not been open yet. Georgia and Florida trending pretty hard for the Republicans, and the rest of these seats are really sitting out there. So there's still a chance for a big night for the Democrats as far as governors go, a pretty straightforward night as far as the Senate goes. And while we're not looking at a blue wave in the House, it looks very clear at this point the Democrats should probably get past that 218 mark and have the speakership come January.
All right, thank you for that, David. Now, Carrie, we were talking about this a little bit right before we went live. What's going on in Florida? What's the deal with Florida?
Someone can answer that question.
Yes.
They deserve a lot of money. I do not know. I mean, Florida's obviously a huge state, big population, diverse population, has sort of every sort of demographic bucket you can imagine at scale. And yet, somehow, continually finds a way to be disappointing. Sorry, Florida.
I mean, I think they should be apologizing to us.
Sorry to the many Floridians who I know and love who are doing really incredible organizing work. And it's such an interesting, dissonant quality of Florida that they could pass this historic expansion of voting rights.
Exactly.
Of the 1.5 million, 1.5 million, over 500,000 of those individuals are African Americans. And so that in and of itself is quite a progressive add to the to the voting total. So it's incredible to see them pass that early in the night.
With significant support, yes.
With significant amount of support, crossing that 60% threshold, and then, but it not necessarily translating on the candidate level.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. I mean, it's it's just a tough state. The way that the gubernatorial race in particular has been conducted has been so disappointing. Andrew Gillum has had to face so many incredibly racist and derogatory attacks against him, and it's an exemplar of what our politics actually looks like. And so for the good side not to come out is it's a little heartbreaking.
And I think something notable about Gillum's candidacy, if elected, of course, he would be the first black governor of Florida, but he was actually the first black mayor, and then also the first black major party candidate to even be nominated for the governor's race. So at least he's already made history. And was very much the underdog
as the nominee, and there was a lot of tension between the Senate race and the governor's race because there was a thought that Andrew would end up being a drag on the ticket. That proved not to be the case.
Right.
He was a prodigious fundraiser. He gained national attention, had a national reputation. And the thing is, Andrew's a young man, so he's going to have a long career ahead of him as for whatever career he wants. But at the end of the day, it's still to lose to DeSantis in that way is a disappointment.
Well, I don't know. They haven't called that race
yet,
right?
I'm sorry.
It's very close. It's very close.
So I think just before we I know that he's behind, and I don't want to be overly optimistic, but I do think that the votes that are out are in Democratic areas. I have seen some people who watch these results very closely say this could be in the margin of a recount. So
absolutely, which is 0.5%, right? In Florida is the automatic recount threshold?
I believe so, but I think it's.
Have we ever had a recount in Florida before?
I can't believe that was 18 years ago. Like, I cannot believe it was that long ago. But this is exciting. We have multiple sources calling the Kansas governor's race for Laura Kelly now. So this is a big deal for Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, and this is going to be a really interesting narrative coming out of today, how we're going to start thinking about what tonight meant. Because here you have one candidate who went hard for Trump, a Trump state, and so did it fail on the immigration and on the voter suppression stuff, or really was it about what happened in Kansas over the previous administration with Brownback? They went in, they bought the whole idea of the Republican economic plan. They crushed their taxes, they cut their spending, and they went bankrupt. And they went bankrupt so quickly that a bright red state was like ready to start throwing the Republicans out left and right. And that was, it's one of those things. I think there's something about a dog catching a car. They did, and it turned out bad for them. And so I think more than anything else, we can look at Kobach as an individual and focus on the immigration and voter suppression stuff. But Kansas as a state, they got a taste of what Republican economic policy means, and they did not like it.
Yeah. And I'll also be really interested once we start looking at some of those vote totals, because Kansas was such an interesting case study this year because you had those four high schoolers running for governor, remember? In the primary?
Yeah, that's right.
And so the local news in Kansas was talking about that phenomenon. You had the state house and the state legislature trying to raise the age of qualification to even be a gubernatorial candidate. And so you had a kind of pop culture, a super micro pop culture moment happening within Kansas and the local press about participation and civic engagement that I think was really interesting. And I'll be curious to see if that had that heightened discussion that led to heightened awareness, that led to heightened participation.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Now, Fox News has apparently called or projected that Democrats are going to take the House. We're saying it seems very likely at this point, but that it's definitely too early to say that definitively at this point. I'm not sure what mind games they might be playing over there at Fox after we saw Sean Hannity take the stage with President Trump last night.
I think it's always advisable to let the votes come in, as we saw in Florida. That state was called in 2000 both ways a few different times, so you never know what's going to happen. But it'll be interesting as people sort this out. I think as commentators, you tend to gravitate towards what's the overwhelming narrative? What does this tell me about life in the country? And I think so far, from what we've seen, I think we're learning that it's not a result that is easily captured by a single narrative thread. If Gillum does lose in Florida, that was a seat that Democrats were really hoping to pick up. He was ahead in the polls, but at the same time, there's a lot of these House races that are shaping up. Kansas, the Amendment 4 in in Florida. So it's a picture where there is a real contingent that Trump continues to pull and can clearly pull into the polls, and that's why you're seeing places like Indiana flip.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there does also seem to be the backlash, and neither side is running the table tonight.
Let me take that further to say, like, let's just get these expectations out of our head for a second. The Democrats, as we talked about earlier, had a horrible Senate map. Senate map. They controlled 23 seats to 42 seats going into this election cycle. And I think this is really clear here, I just knocked off 7 seats in places that Trump almost won or won and said these are gimmies for the Democrats before we even started counting votes. In Ohio, in Wisconsin, in Minnesota, which was very close, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, and Tammy Baldwin just rocked it in Wisconsin. And so, like, we're playing this expectation game, but the key thing to remember here is that the Democrats did incredibly well in the upper Midwest and the Rust Belt, which was what they lost the presidency on.
Exactly.
They're going to win a lot more votes in the House. So they may not get to that 240 mark. They may end up something much closer to 225 or 230, but they're going to get there with a lot more votes. And even though it would have been great to see for the Democratic side to pick up the big states of Ohio and Florida, which are still possible, but they're trending in a different direction, especially in Georgia, they're going to pick up a lot of governor's mansions that were controlled by Republicans, and they are not losing very much, except for some of these toss-up Senate seats in places which, quite frankly, I mean, Indiana, that is a very difficult state for the Democrats. Yeah. These are. We could spin this in a different direction, and I think the expectations are what. And I was just thinking about our last hour. The expectations are spinning us in a weird way. I think we should be thinking about that. And this is definitely not anything that should be used to justify the end game of the Republicans with immigration. That does not look like that would be a great argument for their case. And so I think how we spin and how other people spin is going to be very important.
Well, I think it will be, I think by the Republicans, by Trump, it will be used to double down on the strategy that we saw heading into this election. I think that regardless of how things shake out, looks like the Democrats are going to take the House. We're still waiting, but we think that's going to happen. I think you're going to see the next 2 years of politics in America be even uglier than what we've seen since Trump announced his candidacy in 2015. I think he feels like he'll take from this that he has found a winning formula, that he stemmed the blue wave, whether or not that is really true or not. And you'll see a lot more of this. And I think that's unfortunate, but I think really what's going to determine this is the Democrats are going to get some more power than they had coming into this election, and what are they going to do with it?
Right.
Because I think that's going to, more than anything, that's going to make the difference in 2020, especially the House. Now that they have the House, what are they going to do with it? And the people see that there's something positive that comes out of it.
And this is a really interesting local race that just got called. Max Rose, a Democrat, actually won in Staten Island, which is historically like the one Republican spot, Republican majority spot of New York City. So that's fascinating to me. Max Rose has beat Dan Donovan, the Republican who was running there, to win Staten Island. There's a Democrat representative now in Congress.
And that also means that there are no Republicans left in New York City. So that is now a clean sweep.
Clean sweep.
And I just got a push alert that the first 2 Muslim women were elected to Congress.
Yes,
this evening,
yes. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar out of Michigan and Minnesota. Yep. Incredibly exciting. So I think, no matter what happens tonight, and obviously we'll be live all night with what the results are, we're already starting to see a Congress that is more diverse and more representative, which I think is exciting. So make sure you stay tuned right here on Now This. We're going to be live back again at 11. We've obviously got a lot more to talk about. We'll be following all of these historic first wins that are happening. I think we're getting very close on the Texas Senate race. I know a lot of people are watching Ted Cruz versus Beto O'Rourke. So we'll have that news for you shortly, and we'll be live all night on Now This. Thanks for watching.
Sorry, did you cover the